Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought in light of the last video I just made a video a little bit ago, and I discussed strength standards on pull-ups and chin-ups being added into the strength standards that I promote. It kind of raises the question of why have I been promoting the pull-up a lot more lately than the chin-up. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And a lot of this comes down to just practicality, because people have definitely noticed that. People who didn't realize when I made the switch, why I made the switch, because I discussed it before. Because I used to always say, technically, I believe the chin-up to be a slightly superior exercise to the pull-up. And for people who don't know the difference, we're just talking about hand placement on the bar, right? And that's a chin-up is with an underhand grip, palms facing you, and a pull-up is with an overhand grip, right? Palms facing away from you. So pronated versus supinated. And I used to say that because it involves more bicep, and if more bicep is involved, we have more muscle involved, and therefore it is a superior exercise. But then there are other factors to take into account there. And the biggest one being inflammation of connective tissue, because I used to promote the weighted chin-up for years, tell guys to do it, and I didn't get super strong on them. I did them, and I even did a couple different variations. But I promoted the exercise, and I noticed, again, as I got older, one of the things I noticed earlier this year when I started really pushing hard on it, trying to get as strong as possible on it, my old bicep injury caused a lot of inflammation. And you also get a lot of guys who talk about inflammation in the connective tissue down here where their bicep inserts and all of that, and that's a problem. That's a real problem for a lot of people. And if you're dealing with inflammation that is going to limit your ability to train with enough training volume to develop the size and strength you want, that can be a problem. And we run into the same issues we do here that we do with what? With isolation movements, right? That's one of the reasons I'm not a fan of people doing a lot of isolation work. And let me rephrase that, single joint exercises, because there is no way to isolate a muscle. The concept itself is ludicrous. It is biologically impossible to isolate a muscle. So they don't even use that term in exercise science. They call it multi-joint versus single joint, because people who have a background in that understand that isolating a muscle cannot be achieved consciously. It's not something you can do with conscious effort. Like by thinking, I'm just going to isolate this muscle in just good form. No, you use multiple muscles no matter what. There's no way to train only the bicep or the tricep. It can't be done. And in fact, the more you try to do so, the less total muscle recruitment you get, because even some of those muscles, because they have other functions that involve not just the elbow movement, but the shoulder movement does affect some of the tendons and insertions and heads of them. Even attempting to isolate them can, in theory, work them less. Yeah, you get less total muscle fiber recruitment. And I know you guys hear puppy paws out there. I have the door open. So, we have the inflammation factor, and that's a big one. That is a big one. And I find that me personally, and a lot of people out there notice the same thing, that with, again, an overhand grip, they don't have the same problems. They do not develop the same problems here, and therefore they're able to train harder. They're able to train with more weekly volume, with less risk of inflammation, which also has less risk of long-term injury. And that's a big deal. And people say, well, does that limit bicep development then? The data would say no. I mean, if we look at scientific literature, has it ever been shown that a curl produces more bicep growth than an overhand grip lat pull down? Like when we study it, and I don't mean just in novice lifters, I'm talking in intermediate lifters, I'm talking in college athletes. The data has never been able to find that even a concentration curl develops any more muscle mass in the bicep than a regular old lat pull down. So if we're going to look at it from that perspective, then do we reasonably believe that when we go to a big compound, that hand position matters that much? When a silly overhand grip cable lat pull down produces the same development as a curl using the actual supinated grip, they produce the same development when it's studied, even though in theory we think they shouldn't. So when you look at it from that perspective, I would say there's no reason to feel that way at all. There's no reason to feel that way at all that it's going to produce less growth. Furthermore, when you go look at the data, and EMG studies are not the most perfect form of testing that exists, We know they're flawed. We know that there are potential errors with them. But if you guys look at the EMG data that's been done, is the difference that significant? Meaning, when we look at chin-ups versus neutral grip versus overhand grip, does the overhand grip turn out to be a weak bicep recruiter? No. It still shows that the biceps are heavily recruited. In some cases, the overhand grip pull-up produces better bicep stimulation, at least from what we can measure, and I want to make that clear, that's not the be-all, end-all. There are flaws with EMG data. That still shows, though, that it's better than some types of curls. And we do show that the neutral grip and the underhand grip are, while slightly better on the bicep, there's no real difference between them. They're both at the top of the range. Yet we're still putting the bicep out of that position with the underhand grip. So again, the question becomes, are we really going to get less bicep development out of it when it works the biceps better than even some types of curls? And I think as long as training volume and training workload is sufficient, I would say no. I would say no, not at all. I don't think you will get less bicep development. Again, as long as you are achieving enough total training volume for the biceps. And like I said, if your recovery can handle it, you could work some sort of curl in or something if you really wanted to, if it was that big of a deal. Hell, that's what I'm doing these days. So I don't think it's something to be really concerned about. And then when you look at other things it brings to the table, there are reasons to believe that the overhand grip may stimulate a small amount of additional long head tricep development over the underhand grip. Now, is that, again, come back to that other point, we could say that might be in its favor, sure. But if we're going to say that the bicep development is pretty much similar in spite of slightly less activation, it's probably fair to say that the long head or the tricep activation difference that should occur using the same biomechanical reasons we would say that the underhand grip hits more bicep, it probably isn't going to make a measurable difference in the long term, right? So I probably wouldn't worry about that, but it's just if you're looking for a silver lining when you want to talk about arm development, if you want to find a silver lining there, then, you do have that to fall back on and say, well, okay, even if it works a little less bicep, it works a little more tricep, you're still getting some arm development out of this. But I don't think it's that big of a deal either direction. I really don't. I don't think it's cause for concern. I don't think it's something we need to really worry about. We just don't. So, in light of all of that, you've got those factors, and then, sorry guys, I'm rambling a little bit. Let me get to my last point. Real world carryover. When people have to pull themselves up something, if you ever actually have to do some sort of pulling or chinning thing in real life, anytime outside of an athletic environment on a bar where you're actually doing it for either training purposes or doing it in some sort of competition, like if you ever have to grab something and pull yourself up, what grip are you going to use? If you got to pull yourself up a rope, it's much more similar to the neutral grip. And even if you're pulling yourself up a ledge or up a tree limb or anything else, you've got to climb up something, it's going to be an overhand grip. So technically, even the overhand grip may carry over better. It is still going to be closer direct training. We come back to specificity of training, specific adaptation to imposed demands. A lot of these real world activities, technically the overhand grip should have better carryover. Not that it would matter very much, because I don't think it matters that much. But again, if we wanted to really talk about specificity of training and what's going to possibly carry over better to some other situation outside of the gym, the case can be made for that. So all in all, when I factor in all of these things, and again, this comes with experience, guys. This is the sort of stuff that sometimes when you've been training for 10, 15, 20 years, been around the iron game a long time, you start to have little epiphanies and realizations that things that may not technically matter, when we just look at them from a basic growth perspective and the research and everything else, that when you think about the nuanced aspects of them and how they really apply in the real human body when it comes to just things like general inflammation, recovery, injuries, little things like this do start to dawn on you. You reach these little small epiphanies. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I've taken that stance on that lift, and I do it that way. It's just based upon changing the variation of the exercise based upon my years of experience is what's probably going to be better overall into your overall training program for most people. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.